to the So I'm Adopted podcast, where we talk everything adoption. This journey is not one we take alone. Together we grapple with raw emotions that surface from adoption stories. We want you to be comfortable enough to heal. So sit back and go with us on this journey as we dive deep into adoption. Welcome to another episode of So I'm Adopted. I'm John.
And I'm Lisa.
And we are
Adopted.
And again, this is an opportunity and a space where we wanted to create an opportunity for individuals to have this safe, where we can talk about non-traditional relationships. As always, I give credit where credit is due. Lisa was very consistent and persistent about us being able to tell our stories. And I think based on the feedback that we have gotten, it has been a jewel because we've connected with some amazing individuals. And
yes,
we've learned that, you know, we're not the only ones. And a lot of times, well, I can't speak for that. I won't generalize it. I know for me, I felt like my journey was an isolated one. Like I was the only one that had ever been on or driven past this island. And what we've learned is that there's so many layers to being adopted and that whole ordeal that it's just like an onion. There's lots of layers to it.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest, we had a sneak peek at our guest for tonight, and it was mind blowing. I'm gonna tell you right now. So I'm definitely excited. We've connected with some amazing individuals.
We have, and this one is a different angle that we haven't had the opportunity to have on the show. So I'm excited. I'm very excited about this one.
All right, so let's jump in, please. Before we jump in, we want to thank you for investing the time. Hit the like, hit the share button. If you have a adoption story, if you have a non-traditional relationship, family dynamic story, please reach out to us. We are open to the different discussions because what we're learning is that the platforms are out there, but we don't know how to connect the dots. And that's one of the things that we want to do. We've learned about a conference that they have, a working group of adoptees that are out there. So we just want this to be fruitful for you. So Lisa, let's go, jump in.
All right, let's introduce our guest for today. Her name is Sasha Sedman. Is a cherished voice children's literature, weaving tales of wonder and wisdom from her home in the vibrant heart of Washington, D.C. area. Alongside her devoted husband and their two delightful children, Sasha crafts stories that celebrate the diverse tapestry of families, drawing from her own unique journey through life. Adopted into a loving family through an open adoption, Sasha's early experiences has imbued her with a deep appreciation for the myriad ways families come together, a theme that radiates through her enchanting narratives. Despite facing the challenges of dyslexia, which made the written words a formidable puzzle in her youth, Sasha indubitably spirit saw her transcend these early obstacles. Her journey from a high school dropout to a GED achiever stands as a testament to her resilience and determination, quality that has guided her path to become a beloved children's author. Sasha works is more than just storytelling. It's an invitation to embrace life's adventures and to find the joy in every moment. Her personal mantra to change what doesn't bring joy infuses her writing with an infectious optimism that encourages young readers to seek happiness and fulfillment in their pursuits. So we want to welcome Miss Sasha Sedman to our podcast today. And let me go ahead and get her on in so you guys can meet her as well. Hello, Miss Sasha.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hopefully no more snow, no more being snowed in.
Listen, I'm back in Florida. It is 84 degrees, so y'all can have that.
It's about 60 here, so it's not
Yeah,
too bad. We're
it's not
getting
bad.
there. We're getting there.
Good.
We're catching up.
There
Yeah,
you
we
go.
are. We are. I'm jealous.
So I'm going to tell you right now, even after we had our conversation a week and a half ago, and then hearing the bio, I'm just that much more excited about the discussion. Just I learned a few other things that you didn't share with us that you gave in the bio. So the way we normally start off, it's a very organic conversation. Um, Tell us your story. And because we have not discussed the open adoption, so make sure that you educate those who may not know, because I didn't know before our discussion the other week. So tell us your story, please.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to start by saying there's very different open adoptions now that I'm actually really recently kind of learning about. I recently spoke at an adoption conference 2 weeks ago with my mom. And what I had is now considered a typical 90s open adoption. And that basically meant that my family had contact within reason. So there were, I'll go back to the start of the story and then kind of describe it as we go. But my parents were looking to adopt through China, and they said there was a 5-year waiting list. So they said, reach out to everyone you know, and just tell them you and your husband are looking for a baby. And that's what they did. And it turned out that my mom, and when I say mom or real mom, that's my mom, and birth mom is just for, but my mom had an aunt or cousin, and she said, hey, I have this friend down in Florida who's 7 months pregnant with a girl looking for an open adoption. So my parents got on a flight, and they met my birth mother and my birth sister, who was 16 at the time, at an Olive Garden. And they chatted, and they spoke about expectations and what relationships would look like. And my mom said they went back to the hotel that night and said, I want that baby. And they had lawyers, and they decided that they wanted an open adoption, that that's something they wanted for me and to give me. And so for my birth mother's last 2 weeks of pregnancy, my mom actually spent them with her, taking her to and from appointments, going to the beach, going to bars and restaurants, hanging out. And the way she recently described it is they just became friends. And she was actually the support person in the room when my birth mother gave birth to me.
Wow.
And the way it was told is that a nurse swaddled me and then handed me to my birth mother, and she pushed me away and said, give her to her mom. So my mom was the first to hold me. And that will always just be, I'm sure, like she said, the way she describes it now, which I love wholeheartedly, especially being a mom myself, is she said, I looked at you into those blue eyes, and I had the dumbest thought in the world. I could never be mad at you.
Oh.
And she said, the naivety of a new parent. But she said it was just everything all at once. They stayed in a long stay Marriott for 3 or 4 weeks until all the paperwork went through. My birth mother previously had thought she was going to keep me with my birth father, but they split up halfway through the pregnancy, and she already had a daughter with another man, and she was about to go off to college. And my understanding is my birth mother knew how hard it was. Even now at the age of 35, having a baby, she knew that she wasn't ready, and she just could not handle it on her own, along with life and a 16-year-old, financially, emotionally. And so she gave me the gift of parents that really wanted that and wanted that life and to nurture me. And so she told my parents that she had a bassinet that she had found in an alley and fixed up, and she's a seamstress. So my parents bought a car to fit this enormous wicker bassinet into the back of it so they could drive home with it. And I'm happy to say now both my children have slept in it.
I was going to ask, did you keep
It
it?
has been kept for the past 32 years as a stuffed animal holder, as a memento holder, and it's now in my office with my stuffed animals. And for the first 1.5 to 2 years, my birth mother would send letters and my mom would send pictures, and it was all direct. And a lot of the time with open adoptions are through the agency. So you would send pictures through the agency, they would send it to the birth family. So you don't really know their address, but you have that contact. When I was about 2, my birth mother wrote and said, I would love to meet Sasha. And my parents flew me down to Florida. And my mom said she had this fear kind of build up inside of her that I was going to have some cosmic connection with my birth mother when I saw her, and my 2-year-old self would run into her arms and just have this immediate mother-daughter connection.
Mm-hmm.
And she was scared, but she knew that she had wanted an open adoption, and, she had done all of the research. And at that point it had said that that is ideal for a child, so they can have questions answered if possible.
Right.
And we got to the airport, and my mom said, we saw my birth mother, and I walked right behind her and stuck my head out between her legs. And she said it was the most fulfilling, grounding moment of motherhood, where she was like, you do that with every other person you've ever met. And she was like, I'm your mom. And she's like, from then on, it was like, we can see Linda, we can call her, we can hang out, we can do whatever we need to, but I'm your mom, and that's your birth mom. And we went on like that, where whenever it wasn't really scheduled. It was just send letters, send pictures. If we're going on a vacation, we invite my birth mom, we invite my birth father, we invite my sister.
Oh,
And
wow.
it just was normal, where they were this extended family that, sent gifts around Christmas and my birthday. And it was beautiful. And when I was 11, my mom said, what do you want for your birthday? And I said, I want to go see Linda. And so we flew down, and I spent a day with her sewing a little Barbie dress. And I was a bridesmaid in my sister's first wedding in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And it was great, but that's really the last time I saw her, which is crazy because I have contact with her even now. We text message regularly. But while we were on that trip to Vegas, someone approached me and my mom because they didn't recognize us from the family, and said, so who are you?
Mm.
And my mom said my birth mother looked at her, and it was me and my sister, and then my birth mother and my mom. And she said, we are their mothers and they are our daughters. And my
Mm.
mom said, that was just so classy. It
Right.
was just so perfectly said. And from then on, it was just, Mother's Day. Do you want to call your mom, your birth mother? When we'd call, she would talk about me as their daughter. Our daughter is so beautiful. Our daughter is doing. And it was just such an openness that I never had a worry about talking to my mom about my birth family. And of course, there's problems in every family. Every family is complicated.
Right.
Every teenage years are complicated for every single person I've ever met. So I don't think that's special to adoption, but we definitely had our ups and downs as a family. But even to this day, I have told them when I'm pregnant. I've told them when I'm expecting, what I'm expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And my birth mother, when I was a baby, she sent me some Raggedy Ann dolls to go with my bassinet. And recently she sent my children some Raggedy Ann dolls.
Oh my God.
And it's this like full circle moment where she just finds these things. And I found out that before I was meant to be adopted, my name was supposed to be Rose. And my name is Sasha Marilyn, after my name. And then my mom, her mother was named Marilyn, and I was actually born on her birthday, which was always our little meant to be moment. It was not the due date that was apparent, but when I had my daughter, I decided to name her after Rose, and Rose's first name was Esteline. So my daughter is named Estelle after my biological great grandmother, to honor that and to bring in my birth family. And I've heard great things about her and her strength as a woman. And I just want to continue this openness with my own children, even though they're biological. I think it's important to keep conversations about families that look different, families that are different, families that might look the same on the outside. I was adopted by 2 white parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I had blonde hair, blue eyes. And so unless I brought it up, people just assumed I had slightly older parents. And, sometimes, people would say things like, oh, adoption, oh yeah, they just throw their kid out. And it's like, I'm adopted. Don't see it
Mm-hmm.
that way. Let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
Change the dialogue. Or when people say, do you know your real parents? I say, those are my parents. I
Right.
know my biological family. I know my birth family. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is I think it's funny because my husband was actually adopted by his father. And so he has a really cool dynamic there, where he had a very different experience with adoption, where he wasn't told until he was 12 that his father was not his
Mm.
biological father. And he never had a chance to meet his biological father because he passed before he ever found him. Um, And so we often talk about like the difference between really knowing everything I know and being able to text these people and say, my kid has a penicillin allergy. Does that run in the family? Is that something, oh, they had a reaction to this. Oh, my thyroid's going crazy. What's going on here? And, he has part of the opportunity to do that, but he also, never got to speak to his biological father. So I think it's interesting because I think in my case, I had a really ideal open adoption where everyone was open to it. But my parents also prepared me from very early on, and they also kind of armored me with the ability of like my freedom of choice. So if I ever didn't feel comfortable with something, if I needed to put a boundary up, I had that right and they would support it. But they also acknowledged that my birth family and anyone for that matter had the ability to put up their own boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, invited my birth family to my wedding. And I hadn't seen them in many years, and I would have loved for them to be there. And my birth mother very sweetly basically said she doesn't think they can come. And she gave whatever, I forget what the excuse was, but me and my mom talked about it and we said, well, we haven't seen her since I was 13. This is 150 people. She may not want to answer those questions. She may not be comfortable seeing you for the first time in so long at such a huge event.
Right.
And also I'm not a birth mother who gave up a child. So I don't know those mixed emotions that she may have. But what I loved is that I then asked, I said, can you make my wedding veil? And so she made the veil for my wedding and I got to wear it. And my birth sister came with my niece and I got to meet my niece during that trip, who was 7 at the time. So I had them and I had them walk and honor that side of the family. And I had my birth mother's veil and it was really special. But I know people who have invited birth family to large events and they were really hurt by them not coming. And I think that my parents really prepared me and that I had a relationship from day one where I didn't idealize them and I didn't fairy tale my biological family. And that was really important to how I look at them now, where they're people and they have emotions and they have boundaries and they have things that they're comfortable with and things they're uncomfortable with. And that's anyone. And so I think when dealing with adoption, you just have to go in knowing that there's going to be times that you might set boundaries. There might be times they might set boundaries, and that's family. That's our family. And it's okay to do that. And it's okay to happen. It's okay to have all the feelings about it. It's just, if you want to open that door, you can, and you have to be aware that someone might not open that door. I rarely hear from my birth father right now, but I hear from my birth mother more. I hear from my birth cousins on my birth father's side more. And that's okay. And I know, he is proud and I know she's proud. She has all of my books and I'm so excited to always share them with her. And I wrote one about adoption and I wanted to preserve her privacy. So all I did was put a little Raggedy Ann doll in one of the illustrations to put that in. And I had a friend who was also adopted and his family sent me a little elephant when my son was born. And so I put the little elephant in there too, to itemize him and his journey with adoption and his life. So, but yeah, that's my adoption story. And I guess my thoughts right off the bat on adoption. Sorry if I went on for a little bit.
No,
that's perfectly fine.
yes.
So the first thing that I will say,
Mm-hmm.
The benefit of, like you said, that dialogue, that truth that your mom was able to have with you from the beginning, that to me helped your journey, because I think what happens, and again, I'm speaking from a place where I always knew I was adopted, but I didn't get the pieces to put the puzzle together until I was over 40 plus years old. But having that emotional intelligence so early, I think really, and just in listening to you, it's healthy. It's healthy, and they were very proactive and not reacting.
They were. And I love writing children's books. And something that inspired me was my parents read me a book called Tell Me Again About the Night I Was Born. And it was about 2 white parents flying over and picking up a white baby from a hospital. And that was my story. But I very early on was introduced to this idea of adoption before I could even understand what it was. It was just
Mhm.
a common factor in the books I was read and the things that were told. You know, when I would ask about being in mommy's tummy, oh no, you were in her tummy. Okay. And so when I wrote my adoption book, something that I tried to do was to make it more universal, where we don't have a mom or a dad, we don't have a race or a gender or an age. And so even on the cover, if you can see it, it's all of these different little faces,
Mhm.
so that throughout the book, the child can see and pick themselves out on the front and the
Okay.
back.
Okay.
To make it more universal, because I think that that is a beautiful thing about adoption, is that it is universal and it can happen at any age, and there can be so many different situations. Like you said, you didn't know, all the pieces until
Right.
you were in your 40s, and that's similarly to my husband, where it's just, and you're still putting them together. I'm sure it's figuring those things out, trying to figure out what people were doing. And yeah, that open dialogue I think really helped. And I will say my dad is a little bit more threatened by a relationship with my birth father, where he has two biological children from a previous marriage, where he's dad.
Okay.
And then he adopted me. And I think that he has some feelings about wanting to be my only dad, which he's my dad and I have a biological father. But even that relationship and me being raised in such an open environment, I still can't be honest and talk to him about it the same way I talked to my mom, just because of the way she approached things, where everything was so open, where there was never a feeling of me feeling like I couldn't ask a question, or I felt like I had to make a choice, or I'd hurt someone's feelings, which I think is like really typical, because I think it's hard. I assume it's hard as an adoptive parent to feel connected to your child sometimes, to feel like you're really their parent. Um, and so I understand his hesitancy towards my birth father, but I am really grateful for the way my mom has completely went about it and still goes about it to this day.
So I have a question.
Mhm,
So with the beginning of the open adoption,
mhm.
was your biological father involved in that part of it, or it was
Yes.
just really the mothers?
Yeah, so my understanding is that they were going to keep me. My birth mother moved in with him, and she said 3 days later, he looked at her, and it was the same look that her ex-husband gave before he left, and so she packed up her stuff and moved back to where she was and said, "I'm putting the baby up for adoption." My parents told me that when they were signing the adoption papers, my birth mother basically had everything signed, sealed, delivered before birth, where she was like, the second the baby's here, yours. And my birth father did not want to sign. And initially, the worry was that he was going to back out of it, that he would want to raise me. But what they later found out is he just wanted to hold me. He was worried that they were just
Mm.
going to take me and that he'd never have a chance to meet me.
Well, did he have that
Um,
opportunity?
he did. And I have pictures in the hospital, in the motel, spending those 3 or 4 weeks in Florida prior to me leaving. They really connected and shared moments together. And there's like a lot of pictures from that time, which I really cherish. And he signed, and he actually later on, when I was 18, requested a DNA test from me. He said he's not sure he's my birth father, that's why he had been more distant during my childhood. He had visited, but not as much.
Okay.
And I had never met his extended family, and that was the reason, is they had concerns. I brought it up to my family. I brought it up to my birth mother. My birth mother, rolled her eyes and said, "He's your birth father." Like, and my parents said yes. He asked for a DNA test at birth that was a blood test, and they thought it was too invasive. So they made the decision as my guardian to say no. I ended
Oh,
up doing a cheek swab. It came back he was my biological father. And he immediately sent me this long email about going to Alabama, meeting my family, meeting his mother, meeting his siblings. He had 2 brothers and a sister, and everyone wanted to meet me with open arms. And I was 18, going through a lot. And I ended up waiting until I was 22 years old, and I was moving to Arizona. And so I ended up driving through North Carolina, Alabama. And so I ended up meeting his sister, her extended family, my only living grandmother who's still alive,
okay.
and seeing him and his girlfriend and his family. And it was awesome. And it was almost surreal, because I just had never met them, but we had so much in common in really weird ways. He asked me if my toe was weird, and it was a really strange question because I don't have any biological features of my parents. So it's not something people normally are like, oh, you have their eyes, you have this. And I said, yeah, my toes, I don't have a baby toenail. And he goes, oh, you get that from my mom.
Yeah.
And it was like this really kind of unreal moment. And now that I have kids, I can see myself in them. But I'm like, it's really strange. Like, I've never really had a family member that looks like me. Like,
Right.
not like I've never been like, oh, I have your hair. We have each other's ears,
Yeah.
But it was cool to have those conversations kind of for the first time in a really large setting.
So, was there a reason why getting a DNA test done took so long after the original ask when you were first born?
My assumption, and from my understanding, is that my birth father basically felt shut down by my parents when he initially asked. So his thinking was, I'm just going to wait until she's an adult and she can make her decision. So I don't know if it was going around my parents and he felt like he couldn't ask them, or if it just was a moment of, maybe it's time. But he definitely had every opportunity to ask. But I think the way my mom had put it to him was, when Sasha's old enough, she can make the decision. And so I think for him, that was legal age to make a decision versus me being 11 or 12, where he really didn't know if my parents would have been open to allowing it, even if I had accepted.
Okay.
So I think that was just, in his opinion, she's an adult, she can make the decision, no one's going to make it for her, and I can have that peace of mind that it's not being made for her.
I
So
mean, I can
go ahead,
understand.
Liz.
I mean, I can understand that to a certain degree, but then he lost so many years,
Mhm.
with getting to know you and you getting to know his family, well, your family,
Mhm.
so that's unfortunate that he felt that he wasn't able to approach. I guess he didn't want to get hurt, I guess. Because I'm
Yeah.
sure he was hurt when they told him no at the beginning.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that
He's
was devastating to him.
he's a very private person, and he's never been married. He's never had other children. He lives alone. He has a long-term girlfriend who he has a lot of affection for. She has grandchildren, but he still lives separate. So my understanding is that he's just kind of who he is, and he likes his life the way he likes his life. So I think between him being a very private person and just kind of non-confrontational, he's just kind of took a step back and was like, okay, I'm not her dad, I'm her biological father, and I'm here, but I'm at a distance. And I actually experienced that when I first had my son 3 years ago. I had told him, and he was very excited for me, and I let him know it was a boy, and he doesn't have any biological children other than me, so this would be his first male biological descendant, and so that was really cool for him. But we didn't talk a whole lot. But one of my cousins, his sister's daughter, reached out and we chatted a little bit. And she goes, just so you know, he carries around a picture of Deegan and he shows us.
Oh,
And that was really special. And it was also one of those moments where you realize there was a boundary of, he may not be comfortable talking to me about it,
Right.
but he's comfortable talking to his people about it.
mhm.
And it was special to be able to hear that and to get a little glimpse of that.
Yeah.
And I think it also gave me a little peace of mind where it's like, okay, even if he's not going to reply to my text, or he's not, he is proud. He
Right.
does love, he has love, but sometimes it's just, I don't know all these emotions of how he feels or what he goes through when he sees this life that I've built. And, my dad visits and my mom visit, and they're the grandparents or grandma and grandpa, and they know them from a distance, but they've never met my kids. So
Mm.
they, might feel a certain way about that. And also, he's a little bit more old school. So he's a little bit more blood is blood. And his family, I don't think, fully supported the adoption. But he also was not ready to be a single parent. So I think there might have been some feelings around my birth mother deciding to give me up, that she made the decision, he went with it, and they weren't as supportive of it. So I love all of them, but I do think that played into it.
Right. What I was going to say earlier,
Mhm.
going back to your father, and
Mhm.
like you said, him being threatened,
Mhm.
um, and I immediately thought about with my daughters as a dad, a girl dad. That connection. And, I said, well, how would I feel? And it would be a rough period because normally, not normally again, my situation, my mom had the threat of the file is closed, you can't open it. Whereas my dad was like, I want to know too. Open, let's go.
Yeah.
So to hear that it was the opposite way for you, it's interesting, but it's something about, dads and girls that just have a different connection.
Oh yeah, my husband and our daughter, that is his little princess. She could commit every felony in the book and he just, where do I bury the bodies, honey?
Right.
She's only 2, so she's not committing any crimes yet, but
yeah.
And it's interesting. I remember with my first daughter, that was the first blood relative that I met, that I held, and it did something for me. It was like the Lion King moment where you hold up the baby. And I remember telling her that story, and I didn't know that she is very proud of that. Like, she wears that as a badge of honor. We were talking, and my youngest was like, yeah, she always tells us you're the first blood relative that she met. And I said, you feel some kind of way about that? And she said, well, because she tells me like every month. And in that moment, I was like, wow, that's awesome, because now there's a shared moment. And it's so, again, I'm getting more sentimental in my older age. We went to SeaWorld today, and they have a Sesame Place. In Williamsburg, they have a Sesame Place as well. So they have some of the same rides, but they have this whirly worm. And I don't do roller coasters, but when I saw the whirly worm, I had to get on it. And Jayla was like, Dad, you getting on it? And I said, let me tell you why I'm getting on it. And it was her and Jordan. And I said, the reason I'm getting on it, I said, because in 2013, we were on this ride in Williamsburg, and I got the call that my mom had a stroke. I said, and that's when she got ready to transition. I said, so this is me taking you on that ride, because we never went back.
Oh.
And both of them were like, I remember that, so it was a good moment. And then once we got on it, I was like, why am I on this thing? I wanted to throw up. I'm sick.
Yeah, sometimes we feel a certain way.
Right. I got emotionally drawn in, but it was just a good moment. And nothing happens by accident, for us to be having this conversation tonight. And it just, there's so many connections when you really start to pull back the layers. And because we're so caught up in our routines and the normalcy of what we expect, we miss things, we miss moments. Yeah. And again, I'm inspired just to continue to increase the communication with my daughters, because I see the benefits of having those conversations.
I think it's really important to, like, even outside of adoption, but in general, and this is something me and my husband try and do, is if you make it normal, it is normal.
Right.
If you make diversity and different religions and adoption and different types of families and single parenting and divorce and marriage and all of these things normal to your kids, then it just will be. But if they never see a gay couple or a mixed race family, that will not be normal. And they will go and be like, that doesn't look like our family. No, it doesn't. And you have that open conversation. So even with like social media and YouTube channels and things like that, showing them different types of people that look different, that sound different, and then having conversations with them when it comes up and interacting with them of like, oh, he has 2 mommies. Oh, he maybe calls one mama and one mommy, just like you call mom and dad. They're 2 people. They have different things. And I have, whenever my birth mother sends something, it's like, that's my birth mom. Just like you were in my tummy, I was in her tummy. And then grandma and grandpa raised me. And it's just like, it's just a normal, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to have this big sit down, wait type conversation, especially when they're really little like mine. But it's just normal. So when they do get to an age like your daughters that are able to have more in-depth conversations, it's not like you're adopted. It's like, no, that's, who Linda is. Linda, she sends gifts. She does this. She like gave you those raggedy ends you play with. Oh yeah, no, I know her. She sent that Valentine's Day gift and blah, 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 did a video chat with her. It's normal stuff. And I think that's just important raising kids in general, even outside of adoption. It's just Make it normal. I'm dyslexic. My kids know I'm dyslexic. They know I had trouble reading and I got a GED. It doesn't make someone less than. It just means they
Right.
learn differently. And
Right.
that's okay. And
So
they're going to come across people that learn differently in school. That's cool.
absolutely. So two things with that. One,
Mhm.
like I tell my kids, there are many ways to get to the end destination. Some people take the interstate, some people take the HOV, some people drive through the town. As long as you get to where you're supposed to go, that's the important thing. The second thing I would say is that when I was in the school system and I would do trainings and I would talk to the elementary school teachers, I would tell them, be mindful when you celebrate these holidays that everybody's narrative is different. What about those kids who their parents may have passed away? They're not looking forward to a Mother's Day coming up. You have to make sure that you are addressing everyone in that classroom because everybody's entitled. So that's, again, looking back, I've always been a champion for the underrepresented, and not really understanding and knowing why. But it's just I've always looked at it from a different angle, like the what if, helping me understand my why.
No, I love that. And I love that, just that representation of people and making sure that, like, it's like the underdog in any movie. We're all rooting for them. And it's like just acknowledging them and then raising our youth to acknowledge that and to that be a norm for them of not everyone has a mom for Mother's Day. Not everyone has a dad. Some people for Christmas are at two different houses and that's really hard. They have two Christmas trees or one's Jewish and they don't celebrate at both houses. Like, and it's just talking about that, acknowledging that, and them not being so surprised when the world hits them in the face, because at some point it will. And I love this analogy as parents that we're their coaches and that they're going to play a game of life and we can coach them, we can train with them, we can play with them, we can scrimmage.
Yeah.
When it comes to the game, we cannot step on the field. And there's going to be some wins. There's going to be some hard losses. There's going to be a couple ties here and there. They're going to get hurt. They're going to do great at some points, but it's like all we can do is just cheer them on. And if they need to come back, they can come off. They can talk to us. We can be there. We can be their coach and they'll get back in. But our job is just that one day they'll be their own coach and they'll have their own team.
Yeah.
And that's what we're raising. And it's like, you want them to get to that point. You don't want them to be just sitting on the bench with you the whole time. You want them out.
I'm trying to find a button to hit touchdown or score or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That right there, that is.
Yes.
I needed to hear that a few months ago when my daughter first started college because I was trying to be on the field. And like you said, I got the headset on. I'm up top in the booth. And hey, I got the scouting report. I've seen this. I've seen this Lifetime movie.
Yeah.
I know how it ends.
Yeah, you definitely can't, because I know when my daughter went to college for cheerleading and my other daughter was graduating. So the day of her graduation party was the day that my daughter had cheerleading tryouts.
Oh.
So, and the coach was a little difficult, but I couldn't step in and call the coach and say, hey, I need my daughter not to, or let her try out first so she can come to her sister's party. I couldn't do any of that. She had to deal with herself. So she ended up, unfortunately, not coming to the party because I guess the coach had it out for her. So she made her go last when she could have just as easily allowed her to go. And I'm sure if I had called, but if I had called and put my mom hat on and my authority, then how would that be for her? Because she would have been the one had to deal with the consequences, whether good or bad, right? And I'm not there. So I allowed her to work it out herself. Unfortunately, it didn't work out in her favor. But that's when you have to really not say, okay, I can't be involved. I can't, because after a certain point, you have to draw the line and allow them to try and get through whatever they need to get through, whether they fail or not. You still have to be there to allow them to do that. So it's tough. It's a tough situation.
And also, I just want to applaud you because you raised two independent women who are able to do those things. And that's what you did. And you now have girls on the field who are living life and they can handle it. And it's like, of course, as parents, we want to be there, but it's like knowing that you raise such strong women that can be there for themselves and get knocked down and get back up and handle it. It's like, even on the bad days, like, you got this. And it's like, you raised that. And it's like, that's proud.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're not always going to be there as long as we instill what we need to instill in them, regardless
Mhm.
of, how we were raised or our own journeys. My journey was definitely different from yours and John's, because I didn't know until I was almost 40. So everything was completely normal to me up until that time.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
then everything starts, crashing on me, like, oh my gosh, this is
Mhm.
not my real life, you know. So all
Right.
my experiences, like, this is for Lisa, but
Mhm.
I'm not Lisa.
Mhm.
Well, I'm someone else,
Mhm.
and this is her
Right.
life. So, I had to struggle with that, and because I was older, my kids were a little bit older, so it was a roller coaster trying to kinda explain my journey with them. See, yours was all open and
Mhm.
you're already normalizing it for your kids. I
Mhm.
didn't really have that opportunity because I
Yeah.
kept it a secret for some time before
Mhm.
they even found out that I was
You had to
adopted.
process it.
I had to. I had to process it because I didn't wanna kinda blow
Mhm.
their world up until I kinda understood it.
You couldn't answer questions till you had those answers
Right.
yourself.
But
Right.
the unfortunate part is that I didn't get that opportunity because they discovered it on their own, and then they confronted me with it, like, they
Mm.
had some documents that I had on the fax machine, and they found them, and they brought, "Is this true?" I'm
Mhm.
like, So that's how it came out to them. So
Mhm.
that was,
A
and
lot.
they were devastated. They're like,
Mhm.
"Wait a minute, my life is not my life." I was like, "Your life is
Mhm.
your life. I'm the one who
Right.
was adopted. Relax,
Mhm. It
relax."
has to be hard because it's the people that are closest to you, and it feels like a lie, I imagine, of just, why would you lie? Like,
Right.
I know it's changing so much now in this new, in the 20th century adoption style, but I imagine anything that my parents used to keep from me, it always just felt very big and just like a lot. And I was still young, but it was, why did you lie? Like, people, my two people, why did you lie to me?
Right.
Right. But then they have, and you have to respect. Well, I eventually understood why
Mhm.
they she didn't tell us. I mean, I think my father was the type of person that he'll go along with whatever she decided to do.
Mhm.
So like, if she's not going to tell him, okay. So
Mhm.
it's really my mom. And,
Mhm.
you know, I kinda understood once I kinda got a good idea of why she did what she did, because she was trying to have children for years and
Mhm.
wasn't successful. I don't know the details whether she was ever pregnant and had miscarriages or whatever. I don't know the details of that. But
Mhm.
whatever it was, the last resort for her to have children was adoption,
Mhm.
and they agreed to do that. And then once she had adopted my brother and then adopted me, it was like, "Okay, they're mine, no one else,"
Mhm.
you know, moving forward, no one tell them in a sense,
Mhm.
and until we found out, no one ever no one ever slipped to even tell us that
Mhm.
and that was
Wow.
pretty much her kids.
Yeah.
That's how it was. But
Yeah.
I understood as a mother,
Mhm.
I understood once I found out why she did what she did.
Mhm.
I totally understood. At first, I was angry. I'm like, "Why would you lie?"
Mhm.
But again, she like you were saying, your mother was kind of fearful when you first went down to meet with your
Mm.
biological mother.
Yeah.
I feel that my mother was fearful of me even saying, I wanna know about
Yeah.
my biological mom. I wanna go searching for her," which
Mhm.
I wouldn't have, but she
Mhm.
doesn't know that, and she would
Yeah.
have threatened because I know the type of person she was, and I also had the opportunity to meet my biological mother, so I know the type of person she was.
Mm.
The 2 could not have lived in my world at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
So, all things happen for a reason.
That's right.
It's very true. We find
Sasha,
our families.
Sasha, I have a question.
Mhm.
So you talked about, your adoption was the typical 90s adoption or traditional
Yes.
adoption. Um, so a couple of questions about that. First
Mhm.
one, you talked about your dad being refused the DNA test and
Mhm.
then waiting till you were 18.
Mhm.
What were his rights with that open adoption? Did he have a right to go to you at the age of 11 if he wanted to request a DNA test? What are the parameters or the rights within that open adoption?
So with an open adoption, they have no rights.
Okay.
So my parents have full rights from the time I left Florida and the paperwork was sealed.
Okay.
The main part of an open adoption was the choice to keep my birth family kind of in the loop of my life and keeping me partially in theirs.
Okay.
So my parents still made decisions that I don't agree with. My parents would send gifts, and if my parents didn't agree with those gifts, they would just donate them. And that was something that I wish they hadn't done, because those would be very sweet to have now. But
Right.
my mom didn't like Barbies, and my birth mother would send Barbies, and she would just say, no, we're not letting Sasha play with Barbies. And they were able to make those calls, and I found out about them when I was much older.
Now,
But
did their biological mom know that we're not giving her this?
yeah, they were very open with her and said, please don't send anymore. Like, this is not what we're giving Sasha and what we're exposing her to. And they gave different things, but it's weird and eye-opening. I was adopted by my mom and dad, and my dad's Jewish and my mom was raised Catholic. But my mom was not religious. And my birth family, my grandmother was Jewish, and was Catholic and German. And she was big into Christmas, and she was very concerned that I was being adopted by a Jew. So she crocheted a Christmas blanket, and she gave it to them when I was born. And I actually recently spoke to my husband, because my mom, once I was out of the house, she never put up a tree. She gave me all of her ornaments, all the cookie cutters. She was like, take it, you like Christmas. But in my head, I'm like, did they celebrate Christmas so big because they were honoring what my birth family's wishes were, which was to celebrate Christmas in a big way? Because I always had Hanukkah with my dad and his family, and then I would have Christmas with my mom for many, many years, and it would be these big parties and everything. But that's not really who she is.
Right.
And so I think that was a way they honored the want of that side of the family.
Yeah, it could have been one of the, a deal that they made.
Yeah.
Do. And I appreciate that your mom did that, because that's her sacrificing for you.
Definitely. And that's, I think, something that comes with parenting in general, but when it comes to like meshing two families with genetics, with differences, with all these things, it's honoring, and I love that word, honoring my birth family and honoring my biological history, and that just being part of our life. And it wasn't just like they adopted me and then they were like, okay, you are now cut from our cloth. They were saying, you're cut from a different cloth, and we're going to honor that cloth in multiple ways. And we're going to make sure that you have friends that are also adopted. And I didn't know these things were going on, but I had a really close girlfriend for many years in lower school. She was adopted by a single mom. I did not know that my parents purposely made sure that friendship was there and that we were in the same like clubs together. But my mom was like, oh yeah, no, me and her mom would talk all the time. We always wanted to do girls together. And I was like, I didn't even know that. It was just, that was my best friend.
But do you know why why didn't they disclose that you both were adopted?
Oh, we did. So we both knew we were adopted. They just didn't disclose that they were kind of purposely pushing us in the same direction.
Right.
Because I think they were trying to create just a kinship between us, where they were like, they have each other, they have that similarity. So if they do want to talk about it, and it was different, she was adopted by a single mother. She never had a father. She was married. She didn't have a father-daughter dance. She just was never raised with a father. But that was her situation. But that to me was normal, because that was my best friend's family.
Exactly.
And it was just, that's how it is. Like, it wasn't some shock, like, oh my gosh, like
again, normalizing the non-traditional,
yes,
having the discussions. So you said you recently, I guess, did a little more research. What's different now with before I even ask that, going back, you said that the parents have the right to control. They have all the rights once the file is sealed. Is there an agreement with, hey, we're going to continue to keep you involved for X amount of time, or it's just whenever they say enough is enough, then it's done?
So this is kind of the sad part about it, in my opinion, is that the adoptive family can pull the plug at any time. The kid has no say. In certain states, it's 18. In certain states, it's 21 that the child has a say. But my mom actually became an adoption agent after adopting me. And there were more than a few cases where a family would go into it saying, I would like an open adoption with my biological child. Birth mom is on board, finds adoptive family's on board, baby's born, everything sealed. Parents say, by the way, we're not telling them they're adopted. Pound sand. And the birth family has no right. They can't search them. Like Facebook, they can't message them. Like there were some really sad cases involving that where that just happened and the rug was pulled out from under them. So really it is completely up to the parents of the child, raising the child to make all the decisions.
Wow.
And I was just really lucky that I had parents that were like, here's the information, you can, once I became a certain age, I could email them myself. I could ask to call them. But yeah, a lot of that happens. Or it happened. And it's definitely, there's a lot of really sad stories around children finding out and being like, I'm adopted, just like you said, like you didn't know until you were in your 40s. And there's children who find out in their adolescence and they have real traumas with it because they're going through all of those hormones and just already having a hard time. And then they realize their parents lied and this was supposed to happen. Now they feel, just, I can't imagine what they feel, honestly, but it's, I'm sure, very hard.
And it's an open adoption. So the biological parents really have no rights in an open adoption. It just
the only thing is contact. So the only thing of an open adoption is that the parents of the child allow contact with the birth family and keep contact. So normally that would happen where you would say, okay, every 6 months, let's send pictures and postcards, and they would send it to the adoption agency. The adoption agency would send it to the birth family, but they would have no contact, partially to protect each other. So no one would go to each other's houses. There'd be no stalking, I guess, was like the original thing. And now people are like hanging at the park with their birth family. I spoke to a woman at the conference 2 weeks ago. She's a birth mom to a 5-year-old boy. The parents of her biological son were there watching. She had him and he was in the NICU for 3 weeks. They spent every day in the NICU all together, all nurturing. They go to playgrounds. They come over to each other's houses. Like they're like full blown, like, oh no, this is like auntie. Like she's just,
that's the vision that I had with adoption.
Yeah. So that's now kind of, I think, the more norm now is like this person that's in the child's life, but not a parent. It's just, this birth mother was saying, she went to Europe for 6 months. So obviously she didn't see them during that time, but like, that's the freedom she got by not raising her child and by giving him up for adoption and giving him parents, is because she wanted to be more free. But she's also a call away if he has questions. And now she's back in the area and she's like, oh yeah, no, we just had lunch the other day. This is his favorite spot, and they're all, I think the beauty is they're all so proud of the kid. And it's a child-centered thing now. Like adoption is all about the child and what the child needs and what the child wants and the questions the child has. And there's so much support of, even if a child knows they're adopted and doesn't ask any questions, there's so much support around adoption now of, well, do you want your parents to search for your bio parents and just have that information if you do want it one day? There's just so much out there now. And it was so funny because one of the other panelists was a biological father and his adult son. And he's like, oh yeah, we run into each other on the subway all the time. We live like a block from each other.
Wow.
And it's just like, and it's crazy, but he still respects, even though that boy was an adult, he still respects his parents' wishes, where they no longer have contact with the biological mother because of her own stuff, which I'm not sure about. But they're like, we don't want her to know that you have contact. So if you see her, please don't tell her you know him and you see him. And so that's just a respect point of those are his parents and I'm going to respect. And I feel like that's just any like family member or friend. If you have, someone else with kids and they're like, hey, don't feed them that. Hey, we're not doing screen time. And you just respect that because they're their kids. So I think that that's how open adoption has evolved into of, you're the parents. I'm a bio mom. I don't have the right to tell you how to parent. I don't have the right to do anything legally, nothing. It's just, I'm here and I have love for this beautiful child and I have love for your family that you're creating and you're raising my biological child. And I'm here as as a friend, as a family member, as someone who loves them too and who loves you and wants to make this child's life as open as possible and have all the questions answered.
Right. Wow.
That is awesome. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I have a question. So going back to your mother,
Mhm.
and when you found out that when you were younger, she wasn't certain gifts like the Barbie dolls, how
Mhm.
did you feel once you found out to your mother?
Oh, I
What was
told her she was
what
being petty.
okay.
I say, "You're being petty." And she goes, "I probably was." She said I was a little overbearing. And I was like, "It's okay. I'm a mom. I get it." It's just, I was like a Barbie. And she was like, "I know." But my mom sometimes says, she said that she was a neurotic older parent is what she describes herself as. And her and my dad divorced, and she's now married to another man. And I have a stepbrother from him. And she goes, "Me and your stepdad were just neurotic older parents who didn't really know what to do. And we were just grasping at straws." And she's like, "There's stuff I would change, but I think like looking at her now and looking at all of those decisions she made, she was always doing the best she could." And I think that that's all you can ask of your parents. So I think we're able to joke about those things now, and there's no hard feelings. Of course, I would have rathered have them, but now my daughter has those Barbies. My birth mother sent her Barbies, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, rock on. Like, I'm going to throw out probably the shoes because they're a choking hazard.
Right.
And maybe she'll be mad at me for that because maybe those little shoes will be going up on eBay one day for $20,000.
Yeah.
Why didn't you let me have those little Cinderella shoes? I'm
Right.
sorry. Like, they were a choking hazard. So I made the decision as your parent to get rid of them. And it's like, we're all gonna belly flop sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
but we have to be able to say we're doing our best. That's all we can ask of our kids, of our family, of ourselves. And that's what my parents did. They did their best they could.
And I'm glad that you brought up, doing the best that you can with what you have.
Yeah.
When you shared about the book that was read to you,
Mhm.
I remember I had a birth facts book,
Mhm.
and I cherished it. It was in the top of my closet growing up, and I showed my friends. I was like, "No, I am adopted. Look at this." Never opened the book. Again, not knowing. And when I opened the book, it just had the time I was born, some basic information.
Mhm.
But to have had that book where I could have seen myself in my story,
Mhm.
because there were moments looking back where I wasn't embarrassed. I just didn't have the language or the ability to process
Mhm.
what I was or who I was from
Mhm.
that angle. So talk to me a little bit about the books that you've written, like
Mhm.
First Day, and just
Yeah.
the inspiration of that, because
Mhm.
again, that's a void that I didn't have. And I'm
Mhm.
like, man, how much more mentally would I have been prepared for my journey had I had that?
Yeah, so I wrote First Day an adoption story in so many versions. And initially I wrote it as just my story. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is perfect." And I wanted to share it with some friends. And I was like, "Oh, well, they don't have the same adoption story I do. Oh, they don't have." And I was like, I don't really know anyone who was adopted like from infancy who knew their birth family. And I was like, "Okay, well, let's rework this." And I sent it to some connections that my mom had in the industry. And they said, "What's the reason you're writing this?" And I was like, "Well, I want people to be able to read their own story. I want them to be able to have that book, like you said, to be proud and to know. And I want families to have some sort of tool to open up a dialogue about adoption." So when I wrote it, um, it starts off that I've loved you since that very first day. And we actually have a blank calendar where families can fill out the first day they became a family, which might not be the child's birthday, but it's to open up that dialogue of this was our first day as a family. And then it's a bunch of analogies of, you traveled far and wide. You don't have my ankles, my feet, or my toes, but you walk in my footsteps. With each one, our love grows. We have the words, such a beautiful face, though not mirroring mine. And so it's just a bunch of analogies where it doesn't talk about specifics, but it allows for that open dialogue. And at the very end, it has a space for my first day story. And so we have about 10 to 20 pages of blank line paper where people can write in their own adoption story so that children can have that at the end. So they can, I'm sure, read the book as when they're little, but when they're older, they can have that writing as it's happening from the parents, where they can, you know, share their child's story, and they can have it in there as a little memento for them, because I love hearing about it, but I don't have anything written from my childhood. I have my little book my mom gave me about how often I pooped and drank and birthed and all of those little things that she held on to, which I love. But I didn't have anything written down about my adoption story until I became much older, and I kind of asked them and we filled in a couple blanks. But I really wanted to write something that would allow for parents to write it from that first day. And my goal is that I had biological children and I had pregnancy books that I would, you know, write first trimester, here are my cravings. And my goal is to make one for adoption, where it's a huge fill in the blank, where parents can fill out, you know, what was your child wearing when you first met them? What did they bring with them? You know, when did you decide on adoption? How was that decision made? Who did you speak to? You know, what was your first introduction? Just all of those little details, which some families may not have and some families may have all of. But I want to create basically a fill in the blank pregnancy book, but for adoption, so that they can have those little details, because I love those. And I love being able to hand those down to my kids and have the sonogram pictures and, you know, have little things about like when they lost their first tooth. And it's like, I don't see any of those for adoption, where it's very specific into what other people have. And so I'd love that. And then especially hearing how open adoption is now, is having one for birth families to fill out, you know, obviously with the comfort of the adoptive families, but, you know, whenever that child is ready to have that.
That's amazing.
That's like with John, because I think John, when he was born, or prior to him being born, it was very detailed in the notes that was
the social worker. She would, every week she would go, and I have a file like this thick, and it has details of the discussions. And my first mom, she said, yeah, she would come every week, and we would talk for about an hour, and I would just be ready for her to go. But she wrote, I mean, when I got the file, it answered so many questions and created so many more.
Yeah.
You know, because it was, well, what was she thinking? You know, what was the pregnancy journey like? And, you know, did she ever contemplate back and forth? Where was she at? And it had all those things in there. You know, so it was just, it was a tool, like you said, it was a tool.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, my first mom, I asked her, I said, you know, do you want the file? She was like, no. And I think that, you know, it's still tender for her. You know, and I respect her position. And I tell her all the time, I said, I'm just thankful because you could have still kept your barriers up. But you were willing to at least allow some form of connection and communication. So what I'm not going to do is abuse that.
Yeah. I had a similar, I sent my birth mother a book that was a fill in the blank of like, Mom, I want to get to know you. And she called me and she said, honey, you can ask me any question you want. I just don't like writing down. And I said, okay, thank you. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I would love to have that. And you have every right to say no. Like, and I'm glad the door is still open. Like,
yeah, that is amazing. So where can individuals get your books? Let's put that out there. Because
yes, SashaSedman.com.
Okay.
The World of Sasha Sedman. I have 7 books out. Duncan the Garden Gnome just came out. But I love speaking through experience and writing those books through experience. I think it's really special when someone can connect with that. And I really wanted to be an adoptee who wrote something that more people could connect with. And meeting a bunch of adoptees recently, and you guys, it's like, it's great because it just broadens everyone's spectrum of what adoption is and what families can look like.
We're definitely, well, we talked about it. I'm going to be in the next conference because I want to be in that space.
Yeah.
A young lady that I went to college with, whole time we were there, did not know that she was adopted. And we talked, and, you know, she said that she would never have kids because of her journey, but she will be the best aunt and, you know, supporter. So definitely will be that. So I have a question for you.
Mhm.
I'll put you on the spot.
Oh yeah.
Out of your 7 books,
Mhm.
which one is your favorite? Yep, there it is.
Ooh, so personally, my favorite to read right now is All Out of Ducks.
Okay.
What is that about?
It's a play on parents being all out of the F word.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
I
Is it
was
on Amazon? Is
Let
there
me-
an age limit on this? Because I got
no,
college
so there
ones.
are
I'm
no
all out
bad
of ducks.
words. There are no bad words in this book. There are no
Let's
curse
see
words.
here.
There is nothing bad. I was given the book Go the F to Sleep as a gift for my baby shower. And it's hilarious, but the F word is consistently throughout this book. And I have a really good friend who does not curse around her kids, will not accept the book in her household. Her son's reading, absolutely not. And so I started writing this book because I had postpartum depression. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
It's ordered.
And I thought to myself, how difficult it was parenting from any perspective and how hard it is to be a parent to young children and to be all out of ducks. And also the struggle of parents not to curse around their kids and try to set a good example. So the book follows a mom on a day with her young child trying to create a day of not cursing, but also just trying to make it the best day. So there's moments of trying to get out the door and the kid runs out the door and you're like, fish, don't run in the street. But the way we did it was we illustrated all of these animals that they used instead of cursing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the book, the house is a zoo full of these animals, all of these words. And this parent is looking at their sleeping child saying, I'm so grateful that I get the opportunity to parent you. And I'm so grateful that my house is a zoo because I'm raising you. I'm raising you in this zoo household and I'm exhausted and I'm all out of ducks and I wouldn't change a thing on your head. But duck, is it nice when you finally go to bed? And I love reading it to my kids because they love all of the animals. And then I can also get a bit of a giggle out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important part to me is that there's a phone number on the very front of it. And that is the National Maternal Hotline phone number for calling or texting 24/7 for maternal mental health.
Oh.
And I did not know about this phone number when I was postpartum. I just knew about the suicide hotline. And so I would call that when I was depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to get help, but it wasn't specific. And so when I wrote this book, I wanted to make sure for new parents, older parents, for fresh parents of the little tiny itty bitties, they have a phone number that they can reach out to when they're having a hard time and when they're all out of ducks. And they can also know that it's normal to be all out of ducks, that raising children is hard. And I wanted to put it on the front. So wherever the book is, the phone number is, so parents don't have to look for it. They can just see it right on the front and it's right there and all the animals are looking at it.
And what's the number?
Oh, I
yeah.
got it. I just ordered it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna put
Yeah.
it in.
The phone number is 1-833-853-6262. And I believe it translates to 1-833 TLC Mama.
Okay.
Mm.
We're gonna have that on there,
Mhm.
so it'll be somewhere
yeah.
on
My
the
book will be
side.
here on Wednesday.
I don't know which one, but
And,
it'll
and,
be.
and what's going to be even more powerful,
Mhm.
I'm going to read it with my daughters
Oh, I love that.
because my daughter's here on spring break.
Mhm.
So, and I know it's cheesy, but, you try and get that reconnection time.
Oh, yeah.
Like Sunday morning, we went and hopped on the bed and she's like, let's let me sleep. And we're like, it's 12 o'clock. Get up. Like, we want to spend our time. But one night before she goes back, I'm going to read the book because we haven't had a story time. Because I think even at this age, I got less ducks right now.
Yeah. Some days we're all out of ducks and that's okay.
Right.
And I think I have a moment in there and one of my friends will say it where like, I'm just rotting on the sofa. Like if your kids are content in doing something and you're like, have dishes piled up, have laundry to do, but everyone's like content. You're like, I'm not going to move. I'm just going to sit and rot. And I put that in the book where the mom is sitting on the floor feeding an apple to the pig. Just like, I'm just going to lay here because the kid's content playing. I'm just going to take a moment of silence and then all chaos breaks loose again because you're trying to do dishes, make dinner. Someone's knocking at the door. The kid's trying to open the door to the stranger. There's an alligator licking yogurt off the ceiling. Who knows how it got there? It's just the chaos. And I I shared it with so many of my girlfriends, and we all laugh about it. And we have that now, and we have those moments, and we share them, and it's normal. It's okay to be all out of ducks. we all are.
We call that Funky Saturday around here.
Mm-hmm.
And we get at least 4 a year where,
Okay.
listen, I'm not leaving the house. If
Mm-hmm.
you eat, you eat. If you eat dry Cheerios, it's on you. It's all good. You just fend for yourself.
You said 4 days a year? It's Monday. I'm on 2 days. My kid was eating a Pop-Tart outside in the grass.
It builds character.
Spray painting the lawn. Like,
that's all right.
This.
It builds character. You're fine.
That's right.
They're fine.
Oh,
my daughter picked up a Starbucks cup off of Tractor Supply floor and took a sip of it. I don't know where it came from. I called my husband. I said, well, about 3 days she'll be sick. I don't know who left it there, but some Frappuccino something.
Oh my goodness.
And she's 2, and she was just content as can be. I'm like, all right, this is how it is. This is like
what it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's funny. That is
Sasha, this has been so enlightening and powerful.
Yes.
One, to hear your story and to be inspired by it, but then the resource, that's the thing that is motivating for us. We want to be a resource for individuals. Not only the platform, but connecting the dots and empowering people. And also because I work with children with autism, that's a whole different avenue, so that I'm all out of ducks. That's something I'm going to share with them, with those parents as well.
Yes, definitely.
Because they're, like I said, that's a whole different soundtrack.
It is.
And I have 2 parents that I'm working with that are new to this journey of having a child with autism. And sometimes you have to be okay with not knowing. You have to be okay with, I'm wrestling with this right now. So I'm just excited to enhance my tools and to be able to support you in what you're doing. And this was good. This was very good. Yeah, I knew when we talked before, I said it's something. This is going to be a special episode.
Yeah, this is great. I loved connecting, and I'd love to connect you guys with Barker and the people I know in the industry, and just get everyone connected. I know they have their annual conference, and they have other conferences around the United States, I think, with other adoption facilities. I'm trying to get in contact with them too, and get my book out there, speak out there, just
absolutely. Do you have a social media presence?
I do. My son went viral on TikTok because he was chunky, so we have like 180,000 followers.
Okay.
However you get it.
I started a TikTok because I had recurring pregnancy losses, and I connected with the Trying to Conceive community and rainbow baby mamas, and a bunch of those mamas shared and supported me through my journey and having my son. And then my son was exponentially chunky and round, and a couple of his videos went viral, and we got all the hate, all the love. And so we just kind of kept with it and hung out. And I have that, and that's under the_Kowalskis. If you want to update on my family, we are outside dirt bike riding. We're thinking about getting chickens. We are
the
_Kowalskis.
Spell that?
Yeah, KOWALSKI. It's my married name, and I use my given name, Sedman, for my books.
Okay, I will definitely put that in the. We will find it on one of these ends.
Yeah.
Taekwondo.
Yep.
There it is.
He just had. It's so funny. My husband got back to the house at 6:29 tonight, right, or 6:59, right before our podcast, with my son coming back from karate, and to help me with my daughter, so she didn't have to be in here initially.
Got it. Okay.
Got it.
Well, we definitely will put that information up so that people can get those resources. Like I said, I got the book. Those of you who, Amazon, wherever platform you get it on, please get it. It's a resource to help. Any last words? I don't want to say last words, but any concluding words for this session that you would like to give, whether it's somebody who is all out of ducks? Is it somebody who is beginning this journey, or somebody who's contemplating, or somebody who wants to start the journey because they want answers? You know, the platform is yours for your Sasha's words of wisdom.
Yeah, I think just to remember that any feelings you have are valid, and any feelings other people have are valid. And so there can be a dialectic of those where you can feel multiple ways at once, and you need to give yourself grace. And you also need to acknowledge that other people can have a multitude of emotions, including your children, all at once, and that that's okay. And if we are all out of ducks, you know, I can say that, and I can still have every love in the world and, you know, ram a bus for my kids, you know, at the same time as being exhausted by them and tired. And so I think there's an idea, if you're complaining about your journey or where you're at, you're not grateful for it. And I think that that couldn't be more from the truth. So I think, like, the parents you work with children who are struggling, it's okay to be struggling, and it's okay to say you're struggling, and it's okay to be all out of ducks. And no parent in the world will ever think less of you, and your children will ever think less of you because of that. And I think more of my parents because they told me when they were all out of ducks and they were honest, because I can now tell them, and it's normal.
And that helps.
Yeah.
That helps. Too many times we try and paint this perfect inside the lines illustration.
Yeah.
And that's
color
sometimes
outside the
furthest
lines.
from the truth.
Yeah, color outside the lines. Do it all.
That's right.
Throw a bunch of seeds out in the wind. See what happens.
Broken crayon, still color.
Exactly. I love that. Broken crayon, still color. And remember to be your kid's coach, not playing next to them. They'll play the game.
There it is.
Yep.
That part right there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we thank everybody for investing time. I know that you were empowered by this discussion. I'm John.
And I'm Lisa.
I'm Sasha.
We are all adopted. And again, please send us any feedback you have. Hit the like, hit the share. Just get the information out. Go out and support Sasha with the book on TikTok. Follow her. I'm a fan, so I'm going to be watching, getting the updates on it.
And also, if you want to share your story or your journey, please reach out to us. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and
Facebook.
All these platforms.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Until next time.
To the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the So I'm Adopted podcast. We hope that this was informative and educational. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at So I'm Adopted. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, So I'm Adopted. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, make the choice to begin your healing journey.